So we're going to start off by explaining how the current child support regime works. So child support is money paid by a parent who does not live with their children or shares care with another person to help cover the everyday costs of raising a child. It is governed by the Child Support Act 1991 and is overseen by Inland Revenue. A child qualifies if they live in New Zealand as a citizen or resident, are under 18 years old or 18 and still in school, and are not financially independent or living with a romantic partner. There are three main child support options. A private arrangement allows parents or carers to agree on how much child support is paid and when and how it is paid. It is simple and flexible but not enforceable by Inland Revenue if a party stops payments. A voluntary agreement allows parents or carers to agree on how much child support is to be paid but prefers Inland Revenue collects and passes on payments. It keeps flexibility but adds enforceability, unlike a private arrangement. A formula assessment is used when parents or carers disagree or want Inland Revenue to decide. It provides a neutral calculation based on each parent's ability to contribute. Either parent can apply, and non-parent carers with at least 35% of care may apply from both parents. This option is mandatory if a carer receives an unsupported child's benefit. The child support formula is unnecessarily complex, and Inland Revenue have admitted that it needs simplifying. Confusion about how payments and penalties are calculated often leads to unintentional non-compliance, making it harder for parents to keep up with their obligations. Child support is based on each parent's income, the child's age, care arrangements, other children, and shared costs. The higher earning parent usually pays more. Inland Revenue uses the previous year's income, for example 2024 income determines support for April 2025 to March 2026. Inland Revenue gives allowances to acknowledge other costs a parent may have. These include a living allowance, a dependent child allowance, which recognises the costs of their dependent children not paid for by child support, and a multi-group allowance, which is children they pay or receive support for in other arrangements. Inland Revenue uses an 8-step formula to calculate child support. Each parent's income is adjusted for allowances, then converted to a percentage. Care arrangements are factored in, and subtracting care costs gives the child support percentage. A positive percentage means the parent pays, while a negative percentage means they will receive. This percentage is applied to the child's cost from the expenditure table. However, there is a minimum annual payment of $1,175, even if the formula produces a lower amount. Care is recognised if a parent provides at least 28%, which is about 2 nights a week. It is usually measured in nights, but daytime care can count if nights are not suitable. Providing 25 to 35% of care reduces payments, 35% or more may make a parent eligible for support, and 65% or more means they will not have to pay. Parents new to paying child support get a 60-day grace period with no penalties. After that, late payments incur a 2% penalty the day after they are due and an 8% penalty 27 days after. If parents get behind on payments, Inland Revenue can deduct up to 40% of income after tax each pay period. They can also take income from benefits, ACC payments, bank or trust accounts, superannuation, and tax refunds.
On this slide, I just wanted to point out how much of the debt actually comes from penalties and interests. In Section 134 of the Child Support Act, these penalties are set up much like tax debts, meant to push parents into paying on time. Later amendments, Section 135A to 135G, gave the Commissioner some power to write off some penalties, but the problem haven't gone away. About 68% of the child support debts are now in arrears, and penalty debts alone is sitting at around £710 million. Parliament has always said the whole point of the Act is to make sure children get the support. But in practice, debt spirals so quickly that a lot of parents simply just give up. That creates a debt trap which undermines the whole scheme, and even if some fees are waived later on, the harm has already been done. The second big issue is just how much debt ends up being written off. For example, from 2015 to 2016, there's more than $1.1 billion being removed. Half of that is because people were insolvent, and around 40% is because it just wasn't worth the cost of chasing. Child support fits the same pattern. The Auditor General has said the strategy doesn't really stop debt from building up, and the penalty system doesn't actually get parents to pay. Most of the increase comes from compounding penalties, and the Inland Revenue admits that more than 99% of that penalty debts will never be collected. So what we've got here is a system that's basically generating debts everyone knows will be wiped in the end. That takes away the deterrent effect, because parents realize the penalty won't stick. And it's not fair either for those who keep paying the child support, while others just pile up debts and get them written off. So instead of encouraging compliance, the system puts people off paying and just inflates uncollectible debts. In this slide, we'll look at how the system leans far too heavily on penalties without really changing behaviors. It's set up like the tax system, and we've seen the same problems there. The charges don't line up with what society actually wants. In child support, the penalty rake up really quickly, but the money doesn't even go to the caregiver. It goes straight to the government. That makes you question that how fair and how effective it really is, because it's not helping the children at all. Instead, it just blows up the debt and ends up hurting the very children the system is meant to support. The other issue is that too much of the burden is pushed onto individual parents. The system relies on strict enforcement and penalties to get money out of people, but there aren't any wider measurement to support kids when parents simply can't afford to pay. Holding parents accountable is fair enough, but there's no safety net. If a parent can't pay, the child ends up missing out the money, and that completely undermines the whole point of the law, which is to make sure children are properly provided for. In the next section, we will look at how the law could be reformed to address these issues.
I'm now going to focus on solutions on how we could reform the current child support system. So starting with the first point, the penalty system needs a complete restructure. At the moment, late payment penalties kick in straight away, but escalate quickly, and they compound over time. That means a small debt can easily blow up into something unpayable. Even Inland Revenue's own business case acknowledges there's room to design a penalty scheme that makes it easier for people to pay on time. What we're proposing is to lower the initial penalty rates, build in a short grace period before any penalties are applied, and focus more on early engagement. That means contacting parents quickly after a missed payment to work out a repayment plan rather than punishing them straight away. This would bring us into line with OECD best practice, where the real purpose of penalties is to encourage compliance, not to trap people in a spiral of debt. At present, penalty revenue goes towards the Crown, not to the caregiver. That breaks the link between enforcement and the child's well-being. One reform option is to redirect part of the penalty revenue back to the caregiver or directly toward child-related support services. This would make the penalty system behaviourally aligned. If you don't pay on time, you at least know some of the penalty will help the child you support for. That gives the scheme a clearer social purpose, making it harder for future governments to dismantle. Another idea is to create a KiwiSaver-like approach, automatically deducting from the workplace percentage. Depending on how much the individual makes, this percentage will be taken weekly and be placed in a separate account. The first two brackets will be taxed 1%, the second 2%, and the third 3% into that separate account. This account will be locked in order to pay for any penalties that may occur, or if the parents are in desperate needs, they can request access to this account to the IRD. This approach ensures stability if a late payment is made, alongside allowing the other parent to see directly where the money is coming from, resulting in less arguments. The system currently places almost the entire financial burden on individual liable parents, even when they simply don't have the means to pay. We could reduce this over-reliance by drawing on broader funding sources, for example, allocating a portion of wealth or capital gains tax revenue to support child support top-ups. This wouldn't replace parental responsibility, but it would act as a backstop, ensuring children's needs are met, even in cases of genuine inability to pay. In the next part, we'll show you some real-life scenarios on how both the current law and these proposed reforms would work in practice.
Now we're going to look at part 4, which is child support in practice. In the first scenario, Mary and Bob share care of their 8-year-old son, John, who qualifies for child support under Section 5. They're both listed on John's birth record, making them liable under Section 7 of the Act. Mary applies for a formula assessment through Inland Revenue. The formula considers each parent's income and care percentage, as well as the estimated cost of raising the child. Based on these inputs, John's child support equates to $111.60 per month. Bob has previously paid child support, meaning he's able to make direct payments rather than automatic deductions from his salary. However, Bob has been unable to meet his child support obligations, and his penalties are accumulating. As a result, John is not receiving financial support, and Bob may also face further enforcement measures, such as community service. Under the new reform, Bob would apply for remission under the Just and Equitable test. He would do so by providing evidence of income and care involvement, demonstrating that penalties unfairly affect his ability to contribute to John's upbringing. Inland Revenue then exercises its discretion to remit the penalty and involves direct engagement with a case officer before the escalation of enforcement proceedings. The reformed child support system would also be partially funded by a capital gains tax, reducing pressure on Bob's contribution during financial hardship. This adjustment ensures that children like John would continue to receive adequate support during temporary income instability. In the second scenario, Jen and Alex are separated parents of 12-year-old Taylor. Jen applies for a formula assessment through Inland Revenue, which results in Alex being liable to pay $544 per month. Alex loses his job and is no longer able to pay child support. Despite his efforts to find new employment, his financial situation worsens. Under the current regime, there are two penalties that occur. Once the due date has passed, there is a late penalty of 2%, and after the 27 days, there is a penalty of 8%. These payments are automatic and do not account for Alex's hardship and increase his financial stress. Due to the compounding nature of these penalties, short-term non-payment can spiral into long-term debt. Under the proposed reform, Alex would face a penalty of 1% for every month he is unable to pay. This structure reduces the penalty fees compared to the current regime, offering a more realistic way of repayment. The penalty amounts would be redirected to the caregiver instead of the government, ensuring that the child remains the primary beneficiary of the enforcement process. An additional reform would involve deductions from Alex's payslip if the debt remains unpaid after 28 days. This is similar to the enforcement mechanism used for unpaid tickets and aligns with the existing models that prioritize efficiency and fairness.